With the preseason wrapped up, it's time to look at the linebacker play over the past 3 weeks. The best place to start is with everyone's favorite linebacker, Zack Bonney. It seems like people decided they didn't like Bonney before even seeing him play. Probably because his last name isn't Dean or Trotter, but give him a chance and I think there's some things that people will like about him. For example, he has a very good ability to diagnose runs and quickly trigger downhill. Take this play against the Ravens for example. The Ravens are running inside zone to the left. On this play, the Ravens have a decision to make. One option is to have the backside guard immediately release up to Zack Bonney on the second level. But this makes it easier for the 3 technique defensive tackle who has inside leverage on the backside offensive tackle to close off the space that the guard vacates when he advances up to the second level. This would force the ball to cut back to the unblocked defender and the run scheme. The other option is to have the backside guard help out the backside offensive tackle before releasing up to the second level. When the guard combos with the offensive tackle, he creates a hot A-gap and the linebacker responsible for the A-gap needs to execute an A-gap run through. He needs to close off the space the guard created when he double teamed and force the run to cut back to the unblocked defender. Also, the quicker he gets downhill, the quicker he can help take the double team off the defensive tackle, who can then also work to cut off the run. Bonney's burst is on display, but he does a great job with the technical aspects. He tracks the backside hip of the center, but the key is not getting washed out of the gap by the 380-pound Daniel Faalele. As he gets downhill, Bonney does a great job to sink his hips and load up his legs and play with good pad level. But the most important thing he does is strike with the same foot and same shoulder. This is his most powerful position to strike from, and he's able to hold his gap enough to force the run to cut back. We see a similar A-gap run through from Bonney on a play against the Patriots, but this time it resulted in him slipping past the guard and stuffing the run. Again, versus the Ravens. We saw Bonney's ability to quickly trigger downhill on display on a more lateral mid-zone play. He shows a good ability to dip and rip to clear his shoulders and hips past the blocker, forcing the run to cut back to the unblocked defender again. Here we see from Oren Burks what happens when you're not physical against the block. He cuts the run off, but he gets washed out of the play, and though it didn't result in many yards, he probably could have helped bring the runner down sooner if he played physical through the offensive lineman. There is a clear difference in watching Bonney execute these techniques compared with Jeremiah Trotter. Trotter isn't quite as explosive as Bonney is, and it results in him getting stuck on blocks instead of forcing the run to cut back. There's even times where he's getting completely washed out of the play. Nakobe Dean isn't as quick as Bonney coming downhill either. I'd have to imagine a faster player gets to the running back in the backfield, considering how long this guard is stuck helping out the defensive tackle. Athletically, Ben Van Sumeren has the best short area explosiveness and ability to trigger against the run. This A-gap run through from last year really gets you salivating, but the problem with BVS is consistency. Sometimes he will be over-aggressive, and other times he's too hesitant. But when he plays confident, he can cover ground faster than almost any linebacker in the NFL, and I'm not exaggerating for dramatic effect. Devin White hasn't really had the opportunity to fly downhill in the run game yet, outside of 2 plays where he was blitzed. He also played 12 total snaps against the run, so it's hard to have any definitive takeaways. I will say, at times I think Devin gets caught too close to the line of scrimmage on a number of run plays. Here's what I mean. In their 4-down fronts, Fangio has flip-flopped Bonney and White based on the run strength. He is aiming to keep White on the weak side, which is usually the side with a defensive tackle occupying the A-gap. Jumping back to a play from the Dolphins last year, you can see how the defensive tackle attacks the guard and protects the linebacker from having to fight through a block. The linebacker steps up to maintain presence in the gap, but not too far where he gets caught up in the traffic. Remember, the defense wants the ball to cut back to the unblocked defender. Here, instead of the linebacker running through the A-gap, Fangio has the defensive tackle slant inside to force the run to cut back. Now notice how the linebacker, who was protected by the defensive tackle in front of him, is able to fall back with the ball and become a free hitter. But when we watch Devin White, he consistently steps so far up into his gap that he never ends up becoming a free hitter. He gets stuck on blocks or has to fight through traffic. That's something I'll be watching for in the future. In addition to that, I had concerns about White's physicality attacking blockers coming into the season. He still appears to be catching blocks more than delivering strikes. Contrary to White, we've seen Bonney play very physical at the point of contact. Here we see him explode through Patriots starting center David Andrews on his way to filling his gap. Looking at these plays from the wide view, we can see the difference in body positions when they attack the blocks. Notice how Bonney coils his body into contact. We can see him load up his power angles with good bend in his hips, knees, and ankles with a good forward lean. His strike timing is precise so that he's exploding into contact. Compared to this rep from Devin White, he never truly loads up his lower body and his strike timing is off. Notice how he has extended his arms way before contact. He's standing straight up and there's very little bend in his hips, knees, and ankles to generate power from. On contact, he's absorbing the impact and getting moved backwards instead of delivering a blow and setting the line of scrimmage. This is common in White's game. Jeremiah Trotter is similar to White in the way he handles contact. There was a good play from him in the Ravens game where where he came downhill with some force, but he was taking on a lineman that was peeling off another block. When he's tasked with striking offensive linemen that are moving towards him, we see some of the same issues that we see with Devin White. He shoots his hands way too early, and now he's not loading and then unloading his hips, knees, and ankles at the right time. It results in him leaning into contact instead of exploding through contact, and the offensive lineman is able to control him. Nakobe Dean is more physical than White and Trotter, but in his own way. His short stature allows him to bend and rip under offensive linemen. He has a natural leverage advantage that allows him to win, but just using leverage isn't enough. He is tough and shows good strength to fight through contact. He is undersized and doesn't have good arm length though, so if offensive linemen get a hold of him, he has to work hard to get free. Based on how he plays, there's not a ton of reps where he's taking on blockers head on, but he also showed similar issues to White and Trotter when it came to strike timing and body position into contact in those rare occasions. To overcome this, he does a really good job stacking behind defensive linemen and finding gaps to fall back into. Nakobe plays off of his defensive linemen so well that he makes it really hard for offensive linemen to square up with him. He's extremely crafty playing through traffic to find the ball. I think you could argue that Ben Van Sumeren is the team's most physical linebacker. He will trigger downhill quickly and run through someone's face. Here we see him do a good job taking on a pulling blocker by showing the same foot, same shoulder technique we talked about earlier. I don't think the offensive player wanted anything to do with Van Sumeren the rest of the game. But playing fast and physical is just one aspect of linebacker play. Who has looked best in coverage? I think we can break coverage into 3 parts: technique, athletic ability, and coverage awareness. Let's start by comparing techniques. On this play, we see Devin White and Zack Bonney dropping into coverage and then reacting to a throw in the flat. While the nuances and complexities of football is fun to learn about, it's often the basic fundamentals that matter the most. Here we see that in play when we look at the difference in pad levels between Bonney and White. When Bonney plants his foot to change direction, notice how it's hard to make out his jersey number. Now look at how much of White's jersey number you can see when he plants his foot. As he transitions, you can see his upper body sway backwards. Here's why this is important. Because White has a high pad level, he has to take a step way behind himself to counterbalance his upper body. But look at Bonney. Because of his lower center of gravity, he doesn't have to take a step behind himself when changing direction. Their differences in foot placement is even more drastic when looking at it from the wide view. Bonney's foot placement on his second step travels less distance and allows him to get in a much better position to stride with his third step. White's foot placement on his second step is there to balance himself. Then his third step gets him into a good position to drive, and his fourth step he strides. Bonney is playing a literal step ahead of him. Bonney's ability to maintain this pad level in other phases of coverage is impressive as well. Here we see him show off good hip mobility while getting depth in a crossover run. Maintaining a low pad level is important in a crossover run, but what's even more impressive is his ability to maintain the same pad level when he flips his hips and opens back up inside. Again, you can't really make out the numbers on his jersey. This allows him the ability to accelerate back underneath quickly. This might seem like a simple task, but not rising up while transitioning is something that so many players struggle with. I thought Bonney showed better technique and movement ability than White in coverage. There were a couple instances of White struggling with balance and changing direction while in coverage. Nakobe Dean has a bad habit of standing straight up, hopping in his shuffle, and oftentimes crossing his feet. This right here is not an athletic position, and it can lead to balance and change of direction issues, and it's just a less efficient way to move in general. There are times that he looks good picking up routes underneath when he plays with better pad level and footwork, but he'll need to improve his consistency in that area. Jeremiah Trotter generally plays with good pad level and footwork, but when you're watching Jeremiah Trotter and Ben Van Sumeren back to back, and sometimes right next to each other when they're sharing the field, there's a big contrast in their play speed. Ben Van Sumeren plays with excellent pad level as well, but he is very quick sliding around and changing directions. He's very deliberate with his steps when he's shuffling, meaning he's not just passively sliding his feet, he's urgently pushing against the ground to move quickly. He is sudden when needing to break on the ball. Ben Van Sumeren has the ability to be an impact player in the league, but the coverage awareness isn't there yet. There's been several instances of Van Sumeren being out of position on passing plays. There's been instances of him chasing guys too far out of his zone and being late to react to someone coming back in, and there were a lot of miscommunication and blown coverages among the backers when he was in against the Vikings. Were they all on him? No. But part of his job is getting everyone on the same page, and you could tell there were several instances where he was having trouble getting lined up correctly himself. It's hard to get on the field when that's the case. Trotter, for his part, had a couple plays of bad coverage. For instance, there was a bad blown coverage in the Patriots game where he was supposed to guard the running back in man coverage, but he added on to the blitz when he thought the running back was going to stay in to block. And to add to that, his below average athleticism for the position makes it harder for him to get into good positions to finish plays. But for the most part, he seems to have a better understanding understanding of where to be in zone coverage than Van Sumeren. In regards to coverage awareness, I still want to see more from Bond. Remember, these guys have taken a handful of reps, especially Bond and White, so there's not a ton to go on. But Bond had a clear blown coverage on the first play of the game in week 1, but there have also been good plays from him in coverage. On the Avonte Maddox interception, he is playing the low hole in cover 1, and he does a good job checking his nearest threat before getting his eyes back to the quarterback. He darts into the throwing window for the running back, which forces the quarterback to hold the ball, and he winds up throwing it into the coverage on the backside. Considering he played 15 snaps in coverage this preseason, I still need to see more examples on tape of his coverage awareness before making any definitive statements. But one thing is clear. Fangio is going to blitz his linebackers. Each linebacker had their own share of positive pass rushes in the preseason. First, Ben Van Sumeren just moves at a different speed from everyone else. If he ever sees the field, he will be a weapon rushing the passer with his closing speed. He also showed off a stutter swim a couple times that led to pass rush wins. Devin White closes space quickly as well, though he didn't have many opportunities to use a pass rush move. Him and Nakobe Dean made several plays when blitzed against the run. Fangio continually sent A-gap pressures out of their 5-down front. It essentially morphs into 6-down front at the snap, while also having the benefit of speeding up blocking assignments, not allowing the offensive line to maintain double teams. Nakobe, in particular, is able to bend and dip under offensive linemen due to his natural pad level. He's also extremely violent when pass rushing. Running backs struggle handling his physicality. He's really good in this role. Zack Bonney didn't blitz much, but he showed good technique on a particular stop. He was blitzing through the B gap, but didn't have the space to capture an edge, so he stuttered into a 2-arm bull rush, quickly transitioned to a 1-arm bull rush, and showed off the 1 arm is longer than 2 principle, immediately used his offhand to grab wrist control when the offensive lineman tried to reattach his hands, and was able to easily shed and chase a scrambling quarterback for a 3rd down stop. Jeremiah Trotter did a nice job staying active on a pass rush to get a sack when the quarterback started scrambling. But the most important thing for linebackers is being able to understand the defense and being able to quickly process and react to what the offense is doing. For that reason, I don't think we'll see much of Ben Van Sumeren or Jeremiah Trotter this year outside of injury. We discussed Ben Van Sumeren's coverage issues, but there were also a lot of reps on tape where you can see he still needs to get better at the position. Take this play for instance. He's responsible for the B gap and the run is heading his direction. The defensive tackle aligned in the A gap ends up getting washed into the B gap, but Van Sumeren continues trying to stick in his B gap. He needs to realize that the defensive tackle was pushed into his gap and make the defensive tackle right by falling back a gap. If he did that, he probably gets the tackle. Jeremiah Trotter looks like a rookie trying to learn a new defense in the NFL. You will see reps on the film where the other linebackers are having to tell him where to get lined up. You'll see plays where Nakobe will confidently adjust to motion, but Trotter will be trying to direct him to a different gap. You can't have that as a linebacker. It's a linebacker's job to get everyone on the same page. You see his confusion play out on the field as well, as there are several reps of Trotter jumping into the wrong gap or taking the wrong path to the ball. Considering he already faces an uphill battle due to being undersized and not as athletic as his peers, he will have to show big improvement in his understanding of this defense. He made several good plays in the preseason, and I think he can see the field with time, but I think this ends up a redshirt year for Trotter. There's a big difference in the movement pre-snap from Trotter compared to Bond and White on the field. Bond and White are confidently adjusting to motion, and they're understanding their role and where they need to be so much that they move on a string with the safeties while shifting to disguise their intentions pre-snap. We still need to see more reps from Bond and White as they played less than 30 snaps each in preseason, but those two, along with Nakobe Dean, are far ahead of Trotter and Van Sumeren when it comes to the mental aspects of playing defense. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be those three vying for playing time the majority of the year.